Colin. Elizabeth, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell me and everyone who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Elizabeth Kraus, and I worked for the last decade to invest in startups as a venture capitalist and moved to Montana about 4 years ago, more or less retired from venture capital and moved here to figure out what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I have been working on a residential real estate project up in Paradise Valley for the last 2 years and find myself with a blank slate again. And I still am keeping an open mind of what's next, but I'm working on three different things that are lighting me up these days. The first is I had a pretty big shift in my life 4 years ago when I moved to Montana, and I've been chronicling my experience and some of the things that I learned through a blog and podcast called Imperfectly Honest. And then I am dating for the first time since I was 21 years old and have found that describing yourself in 300 characters and four pictures on a dating app is not that efficient. And so I'm now hosting events where best friends pitch why they should date you, called the Wingman Pitch. And there's one coming up in September at Last Best Comedy. And then lastly, this is probably the biggest thing that I'm working on. So I figured out that the checks that we wrote to startups were oftentimes the least impactful thing that we did. And connecting them with mentors and sales contacts and helping them break down some of the psychological barriers to growth was more important. And so I'm taking what I've learned from investing in and accelerating 112 startups now to accelerate people who are doing cool things in the state of Montana. And that could mean anything from being an executive director for a nonprofit to being an entrepreneur to just being a change maker in our state. And I'm looking forward to figuring out what that means.
I have a lot of questions.
Great.
I'm going to start with what you're doing in Paradise Valley.
Yeah.
Is this part of any of the VC stuff you're doing? Is this a separate venture? Let's start there, and I'll try to follow that list of three
Yeah.
things you shared.
So it is a totally separate venture, but there's some parallels. So I just have kind of figured out that it's more about who I'm investing in rather than what I'm investing in. And when I was trying to figure out what I was doing when I moved here, I serendipitously met the hardest working entrepreneur I've ever met, which says a lot because I've met thousands of them. And he was working on this project up in Paradise Valley and he needed some help. And so I've learned from the startup world that sometimes that means taking out the trash and sometimes it means really high level strategy. And he needed a little bit of both. And so I started working with him and we're a good team. So decided to invest my time and capital in that project, which is winding down now.
Okay. And is there much more about that project? Do you want to speak about any of that, or is that still?
Well, depending on when this publishes, it might be for sale. So
Okay.
anyone who is looking for a unique property with amazing views of Emigrant Peak might want to check it out. And it's a 4,200 square foot home and then 5 apartments. And so it's a great opportunity for anybody who wants a convening space, a retreat space, or any of the people who are looking for employee housing, which is a real crisis in that area.
Yeah. Okay. And you said you were in the VC world for about 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like you learned a lot and had some sort of epiphanies of to sort of what this money is or isn't doing and what actually makes this whole thing. Hi, folks. Quick note from me. If you don't already know, the goal of Mountain Mule is to build real connection between Montana's businesses and the people they serve. And if you don't know what Mountain Mule is, we provide private transportation services and Yellowstone National Park tours. If this episode or any other has given you something worth thinking about, smiling at, passing along, I've got a small ask. Share it with a friend, text it to someone, consider following the show. Whether you're using our services directly or following and sharing the show, those simple actions help support this business as well as the businesses and guests that have been a part of the show. Thank you for supporting these Montana businesses, local jobs, and this beautiful state. Now back to the show. Impactful for the startup.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's changed a lot. So when I started investing, there was about 1/300th of the capital that's out there now investing in early stage startups. And so when I started, I would say the check that we wrote was more meaningful. Now, because we've had a lot of people who have had success with technology, there's a lot more people investing in early stage technologies. And COVID really changed venture capital because you used to have to get on a plane and go to Silicon Valley or New York to pitch venture capitalists. And now a lot of those VCs are doing work from Italy and Lake Tahoe and all those things. And that is actually an opportunity for entrepreneurs like entrepreneurs in the state of Montana to reach those venture capitalists. But I would say, if I just kind of had to sum up maybe the most important thing that I learned that might be applicable to people listening to this, is that there's a lot more efficient ways to make money than in venture capital. It takes a long time to get your money back, and it's a really risky business. And there's nothing better than investing in people who will walk through fire to make their dreams come true. And the trickle-down effects of companies like that. One of the companies that I was involved with started with 3 employees and grew to 3,000 employees and made a marked difference on our community and the lives of those employees.
Is there a term I've heard that, venture capital is one of the biggest change agents in the country or the world? Have you heard that, and do you believe that?
I've heard that. I personally don't agree, which is perhaps a controversial statement. And the reason for that is because those success stories of going from 3 to 3,000 employees are very few and far between. And a lot of times getting a company like Walmart to shift 1% is much more impactful than the hundreds of companies that you have to invest in to have that one success story. So when we invest as venture capitalists, we make 10 investments and assume that one of them will do really well. So I actually think that the best way to make change is to figure out how to shift big companies just a little bit.
So you take someone like Walmart with a giant lever, and that 1-degree shift is going to have a massive impact because
Exactly.
because of the sheer size of the impact they have globally.
Absolutely.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And the dating was the third thing that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And this will tie into when we met, when we went to dinner, but explain how you got to that. Is this the first one you're doing here at Last Best Comedy of this?
Yeah. So I was married and in a relationship with my ex-husband for 21 years and figured out that dating in my 40s is quite an adventure, and figured out that there's actually a lot of interesting people who are looking for romantic connections, especially in Montana, and that they don't quite know how to connect to the people who are really interesting to them. And so decided to make it a little bit more entertaining and more fun than being on a dating app, and launched the idea.
Yeah, this is a cool concept. And it can be, you've moved as an adult, and I have too a couple times. There can be challenges to making friends as adults. I think you get better at it, per se, networking, and it seems like it's a muscle that can be exercised and strengthened. But yeah, there can be a lot of challenges there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why at these events, we're going to have bracelets that indicate what you're looking for. And it could be that you're just looking for friendship. Also, as someone who is in a monogamous relationship for 21 years, it's kind of fun to vicariously live through your friends who are dating, because you don't really get that opportunity when you're in a monogamous relationship, which there's a lot of benefits to the security and consistency of that kind of relationship. And it's fun to see what's out there too.
Yeah, because I think you were saying it's, very hard to use 300 words to describe who you are.
Right.
In my experience, as someone who met my now fiance online dating, the the interpretation that you might get from their profile and who they are, in my experience, has been vastly different almost every time.
Yeah, I think that that's true. Oftentimes I've found, and this is why I like this idea of asking a best friend to pitch you. Uh, the most interesting men that I've met on dating apps wildly undersell themselves because it's awkward to boast about yourself and to take pictures that seem like you're almost overinflating your looks just slightly. And yeah, it's not so awkward to ask a best friend to tell you people why you're amazing.
This makes sense. And as someone who was, shamed for having my shirtless picture on my dating profile by my now fiance, and to which I responded, "Hey, I was just trying to advertise what was for sale."
Yeah, I love that.
But that's a fine line too, because somebody can see that and think, like, I don't want anything to do with this person.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of great connections could be missed too, because you'll just make that snap judgment and you don't, I'm not there to kind of state my case and maybe, be a little bit charming if I am, other than just, here's the picture. Who knows what was going on? You can make your assumption.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think you never know what you're going to get from just putting yourself out there. Actually, the guy that I met, who's now my business partner and best friend in this Paradise Valley project, we met on Hinge, the dating app, figured out we weren't soulmates, but figured out that we made good business partners and friends. And I have a handful of friends that I've met on dating apps.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of have to put yourself out there, I think.
Yeah. And I remember I met a gal years ago on Hinge, and I didn't feel a connection beyond friendship. Before we keep rolling with today's episodes, I want to tell you about someone who changed how we show up as a business. When clients land on our website, we hear the same thing over and over. It just feels right. Amy of Unbridled Form asked us questions we'd never thought to ask ourselves, helped us figure out the deeper identity underneath our services, and translated that into a brand world we're genuinely proud of. Our ongoing partnership is easily one of the best investments we've made. Learn more at unbridledform.com. Now back to the show. She obviously wasn't looking for that, so it didn't go well, but that was just, like, I was just being honest with her, and I told her that very directly, so that's what it was. But yeah, there can be a lot of different variations of what ultimately comes out of it.
Absolutely.
Can we talk about when we met at the dinner that
Sure.
that you hosted?
Yeah.
And tell me what your premise was for that, because I was very impressed, and that's why I was excited to have this conversation. But if you can sort of reiterate what that was or what the premise was.
Sure. So this is part of my Imperfectly Honest project. And the broader premise of the project is I have shifted from the person that I always thought I should be and the person I thought I was obligated to be to the person I really want to be and feel like I was actually born to be. And what I needed to do to shift that was to be honest with myself about the things that I was good at, the things that I want, and to be honest with others. Because you sort of get stuck in the pattern of who you've always been. And I started to have a series of honest conversations that were helpful to me and I thought would be helpful to others. And so that's how I launched Imperfectly Honest. And I started to just take that through every aspect of my life, including small talk at cocktail parties and dinners, and figured out that I really enjoy more meaningful conversations than the kind of small talk that you have about the weather and what the snow's like and all those things at a typical dinner. And so I started hosting these Imperfectly Honest dinners where I would pull together interesting people like you and your fiance and just ask a series of questions to provoke thoughtful conversation. And I'm glad that you came to one of those.
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. I thought it was just going to be a bunch of small talk. What do you do? And all that kind of stuff. So I was very refreshed, and that was kind of the last thing I expected. And I don't know if there was if there was more of a premise that was talked about beforehand, but I wasn't filled in on it. So I just, my fiance asked me, I said, yeah, let's do it. And it was very refreshing to have that type of dinner. I thought it was a great dinner, and it was fun to get to know everyone.
Thanks. And it was really refreshing to have you and your fiance there as well. I gave her a little bit of background, and you guys just immediately struck me as curious and open people. So that's always a great ingredient for a good dinner.
And so this is the premise of your podcast?
Correct.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're just trying to I'm excited about this because even more recently I'm part of a men's group, and we've done the same thing as kind of give your bio, but then let's go level 2.
Mm-hmm.
And it very much reminded me of this exact same concept of, who's the person underneath the facade of who we how we kind of, portray who we are professionally.
Yeah, I think we have a tendency in our culture to focus conversations on what we've done and what we're planning to do rather than figuring out who we are.
Yeah, my fiance says that I love when she meets people is, how do you spend your time? And even that contrast to what do you do
Right.
can go so much further. So how did you get to this point where you were sort of sick of having these conversations? And it seems like almost contrary to being in VC world. You think, everyone's, you got to put your best foot forward and show how much of an accomplished business person you are or will be in order to get this funding, not have deeper conversations about who you are.
Well, the average VC might operate like that, but my business partner and I did not operate like that. So these conversations are actually somewhat similar to the conversations that we had as venture capitalists, because again, especially when you are investing in a guy, a girl, and a dog in a basement, you really got to figure out who they are. And so instead of asking, where did you go to college? We would ask things like, what's your best example of something seemingly impossible that you made possible? Or what's one thing that you would do over again if you had the last 3 months to do again? And what's the last time that you really thought that you were up to a challenge and were not? And those were the questions that helped us figure out who people were and whether we wanted to invest in them. And I've just sort of taken that same approach to all of life, because every friendship is an investment. You're investing time, sometimes money. So I think I got even more intolerant of small talk after having those kind of conversations in my career.
Yeah, this makes sense. So is this experience in VC kind of what was this catalyst for you moving to Montana and sort of changing what you're doing with your life?
Well, so I've been working from home since 2005. And my ex-husband started working from home just before COVID. And he grew up in Helena and grew up with a single mom that struggled to make ends meet. And he had this view of this home that he wanted to build when he was 8 years old. And we went and visited Helena a couple years before COVID, and I thought it seemed amazing. I know that people in Montana aren't always crazy about people from Colorado moving here, but I lived in
anywhere
or anywhere, right? Especially Colorado, Texas, and California. But we worked really hard to have a good life in Colorado, and it's easier to make a good life here. Mm-hmm. And so we saw that, and we could both work from home, and he had this vision of this dream home that he wanted to build. And so we decided to build that right before COVID and planned to move here, and moved here together, and figured out while we were a really good pair for the previous chapter in our previous life that maybe we weren't the best pair for the second. So that's really what brought me to Montana. And then it was more of, gosh, I've moved here. I'm now divorced. I've more or less retired from my career. What the heck am I doing? Mm-hmm. That led me to all these other things.
Okay. And what were you doing before VC work?
I was an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's how I was an entrepreneur. I started my first business at 24 and decided to get out of that business at 29 and started just talking to other startups to figure out what my next chapter was and figured out how much I had learned by trying to make a startup go for 5 years. And so I started making really small investments, but mostly investing my time in those startups and figured out I liked that. And that's how I eventually became a venture capitalist.
Do you mind if I ask what type of business you were in?
Sure. It was actually funny how this has come full circle. It was more or less a dating app for colleges searching for the right students and students searching for the right colleges. So
Okay.
if you were a student, we'd ask you 30 questions to figure out the right schools for you. And then if you wanted us to pass on your information to a college, we did that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were in the tech space.
Yeah. And funny, I didn't realize this until now, but maybe this was all going in the same direction because we were my USearch, the honest college matchmaker.
And now you're, what are you calling the dating thing that you're
The
doing?
dating thing is called the wingman pitch, but
Okay.
it's under this imperfectly honest umbrella. So I guess honesty has always just been webbed through everything that I've done.
And when you had this startup, were you looking for VC funding at any point?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you able to get any or no?
So we convinced my mom to invest.
Okay.
And then decided that we didn't need any other capital besides that.
Mm-hmm. Was that the worst thing you ever did or a good move?
It worked okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I always give people the advice that if they really believe in their opportunity, that they should invite the people closest to them to invest. So one of my business partners in my venture capital firm was one of the first employees at Facebook. And she wanted to ask her mom to invest. And she didn't because she thought that that was asking her mom to do too much. And that cost her mom a lot of money. She could have delivered a 1,000x return on her mother's investment. And I always think about that if you really believe in your opportunity, you should invite the people closest to you to do it. And you should always make sure that people who invest in you aren't going to miss the money. And I was fortunate enough to have a mom who wasn't going to miss the money if she lost it.
Were you the person that told me about that or somebody else?
Maybe me. I tell that story a lot.
Yeah, because I swear I'd heard that or read that somewhere. And I was thinking that's either coincidence or I heard that when we had dinner that night.
Maybe.
Okay, so you said from like 24 to 29, how was it getting out of that and making that transition? And I've had a different business and what feels like a whole different life. And now I do. And I know that's, we were kind of talking about getting to know people. That becomes very much your identity.
Yeah. Yeah. I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into that. And it was my first business. So it really did feel like my baby. And I thought that I could really make it go. And I more or less beat my head against the wall for 5 years, and I managed to keep it afloat, but it wasn't the big success story that I envisioned. And I think the lesson that I've really kept with me is that it's hard to figure out as an entrepreneur when you're trying to push water uphill with a rake, and when do you need to just keep pushing, and when do you need to accept that it's just not going to go. And so I just have noticed through this experience of now working with hundreds of companies that sometimes there's hard periods, but if you go for more than a year or two and feel like every time you put effort in, something goes wrong, that might be a sign that it's just not right. And so I just kind of had a series of 5 years of we'd have one small win and then we'd have 3 setbacks. And I'm glad that I closed up that business because at the end of the day, there's a big opportunity cost in continuing to pursue something that just isn't going to be a big enough idea.
Yeah. And that's like, I can speak from experience. It's very hard to know, when it's one or the other.
Yeah. How did you figure out when it was time?
Well, I grew up farming, and that's what I was like that, I just thought that was kind of my narrative is I will be a farmer
Mm-hmm.
and I will be dairy farming. And that's, like I left my family's farm and went and rented out my another farm on my own with the girl I was dating at the time. And like financially it just made no sense, especially with the model I was using at the time. But it just like that was my identity and I like
Mm-hmm.
did not understand life outside of that. So it was enough of that, like continually banging my head against the wall and then just saying like this will continue if I don't make this very hard decision. And that's very much different than the like this business I'm in now is much more of a conscious choice than that. And there's still those days in this, so it's a lot, but I don't know. It was just enough hardship to finally realize that if I wanted to keep suffering, that was going to be a conscious choice.
Mm-hmm.
Very grateful for all the things I learned and the growth that came out of it. But yeah, and I was young. I was like 25, and like I'd been doing that my whole life. And also started a company. I guess it was 18, selling hay.
Mm.
So we'd make hay on our farm, and then it was that business. It was the dairy business, giving them both up. But it was I don't know. It's weird. I always wonder when people call a business a failure. How do you define a failure?
Right.
Is bankruptcy a failure? Or is walking away at the right time a success or a failure?
Right. Plus, I think, is it a stepping stone to something else? Speaking for myself, that business, a lot of people would consider to be a failure. And it led me to a lot of really cool things that I would not have been able to do had I had decided not to start my own company.
Yeah. Yeah. I've wondered that all the time is how do people define a failure? And the story is never really finished and you never
Mm-hmm.
know where that's going to take you then.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now are you excited to be stepping away from the VC world now?
Yeah. Last week I was in Helena and did office hours at the Sidecar co-working space, which if anyone's in Helena, they should check that out. It's in a really nice building and a great location in town. And I've met a lot of innovative people there. And I was kind of back in my own old world and I really liked it, I have to admit. And in this next chapter, I want to do something similar. I just don't want to do it with technology companies because what got old was that I had to look at about 1,000 opportunities to invest in one. And I don't like that churn.
Yeah. So, you think you want to follow a similar vein of VC or investing in certain things?
I do. Yeah. I'm just less concerned with whether the things that I invest in are going to be $1 billion companies anymore. I'm more interested in how it's going to light me up to work with them and whether they're doing something that I care about and whether they have extraordinary work ethic. Because one of the things that I love about working with people in Montana, like yourself, who grew up working on ranches or farms, is they know how to work. And a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've met in other parts of the country see entrepreneurship as a sexy way to circumvent working. And it's a rude awakening because a startup is not a way to circumvent working. It's a way to work yourself into a really taxing job.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers logically, it's actually the exact opposite.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's almost an irony in itself if you think this is a way I won't have to, I won't have to work.
Yeah.
What I love about it and was always drawn me to it, which I think this is partially in growing up from a farm, is there's no cap. Like the only cap is myself,
Mm-hmm.
but there's unlimited potential depending on how I want to take it. And sometimes it's a time and place thing, and where a lot of it, is the work too.
Right.
But the thing about a salary or a W-2 job is that I just see that limitation, and I don't know, it kind of bums me out.
Mm-hmm.
There could be a lot of freedom in it too.
I think that that's just a good principle in business in general, that if the limit on your business is your time, that's a hard business.
Yeah. Yeah, because you can only
Work
do
so
so
much.
much. Yeah.
And It's one thing to have enough energy to put all of your time into your business and work 60, 70 hours a week when you are 25 and really excited about your business. It's another thing when you've been doing that business for 20 years and you're 20 years older to want to continue to do that.
Yeah. And even myself personally, I'll speak to it because I'm getting married here shortly and want to have kids. And that is going to be a very different set of priorities.
Right.
And, how do you build a lifestyle around that? And how are you not sure this is just sort of the progression you found yourself in because you don't have all that foresight to think about, how much time do I want to spend with my kids?
Right.
How much do I want to be at work? Do I want to be working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day? And it's just a very different set of priorities.
Right. I hope for the future of our country that parents don't want to do that and raise children.
Yeah. I think there's a lot more awareness around it now than there was 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot of people that I talk that are, quite a bit older than me will say that, that was kind of how things were. But the next generation, fortunately, has a lot more awareness around that.
Right. Yeah. I don't have children, but my brother has 3 kids and we had a really good dad. My dad was one of the more active dads in our friend group. And my brother probably spends more time with his kids in a week than my dad spent with us in a month. It's just culturally different.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, it's kind of praised now. Like in that time, not making any excuses for anyone, but that's kind of what's praised and what's prioritized. And you are just, all good intentions. You're trying to make a good living for your family.
Right.
But I think that was just very common is parents went to work a lot. And I don't know. It's kind of weird to think that somebody else is raising your kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's a concept I think of now as someone who wants to have kids is, do I want to send my kids to daycare and have them raised by somebody else? I was homeschooled. And my mother made that choice very consciously because she wanted to raise her kids.
Yeah.
And, there's plenty of trade-offs there too, but I think about that a lot. And I have my biases from being homeschooled, but, you can put a lot more intention into what is influencing and the kind of care and love your child's getting when you're the one providing it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I have been enlightened around the challenges of childcare in our state of Montana as well. There's an estimated 100,000 people of the 1.6 million people in our state who are opting out of work because they can't find affordable childcare for their children.
I didn't know I guess I'm surprised not to ignore everything else you said, but we're at 1.6 million.
Well, I happened to look that up on ChatGPT this morning, so we might want to fact check that, but it's something around there.
And I've heard that too. And Jessica, she runs Dino Drop-In and a Montessori school. And that's I know that's the hardest thing in this state, especially in Gallatin County, because it's so expensive and, teachers need to make enough money to make a living here. And then parents can't afford it. And I don't know where that's just there's not good variables on either end of that.
No. And this statistic we might want to fact check too, because I was told this about 2 years ago, but Montana, it was 48th in teacher pay.
Oh, wow. I've even heard that about MSU, that their wages are based on state wages. So that does not contrast well.
Right.
Because if the state is there's huge spikes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm in the process of figuring this out now, but I am really curious to talk to anybody who is doing something innovative with childcare in our state. I'm not sure how profitable childcare can be, but I am curious about that. Sometimes people think that there's a huge trade-off between profit and philanthropy and doing what's right. And I've found that sometimes it's exactly the opposite. So I'd really love to talk to some people who have some innovative and profitable models for childcare in our state.
Yeah, I should connect you with Jessica.
Great.
That's a cool question that I'd love to ask you about is, being in the VC world is, wanting to do what you think is the right thing morally for your town or for your country and what is actually going to make a profit. And you're thinking that those two have a positive intersection if they're approached properly.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a company called Wunder, Wunder, and they were a Techstars company. Techstars is one of the, actually, I think it's the largest accelerator of startups in our world. And they are still around 12 years later, I think, from the when they went through that program and are doing really well. And they connect investors to clean energy products. And so I love stuff like that, where that's a profitable success story and you can invest. And I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs who were more focused on changing the world than making money who failed miserably. I think you really have to have both. And sometimes, there is a larger benefit from just supporting a profitable company that doesn't on the surface do something that is really philanthropic. So, Dell, for instance, I just read that Michael Dell made a huge donation to this new fund that's going to give kids a small savings account, stock account that they can grow over time. And I don't think people look at Dell as a impact investment.
Yeah, that is interesting to think about that. If your margins are so great, does it make more sense to put those margins into the things you believe in rather than to try to build a company to just try to achieve those things? I think that's a big issue, and like something I've experienced myself is you kind of think you can only do one or the other.
Right.
And it's the narrative of all the artists, and everyone is like, I'm a broke artist, I can't make any money doing this. But I think it's a mindset thing, which it's something I've am still working with today. But you can, I think you can do something that is truly a benefit, and you can be very profitable at the same time.
Yeah. I have a question on this topic. So one of the things that I've noticed since moving to Montana is that people go out of their way not to overcharge, which I appreciate. And I really wonder how much they're limiting their potential and the growth that they could provide for our state by being overly concerned about charging too much. Have you experienced that or have any thoughts about that as a business owner?
Yes, firsthand and secondhand as a business owner and as a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking to myself, I grew up on a dairy farm. There was always a scarcity mindset. We weren't making any money and everything was expensive. So you almost, when you get it turned to where your name and your price, you almost feel this guilt as if you're part of this problem, when really that's much more of a business model problem. But yeah, you see it all the time, and it's kind of a bummer. It's like, hey, if you work this much, and I had to learn this lesson myself, if I'm going to work this many hours and be this dedicated, I at least want to have something, financially to speak for and some sort of payoff. But that, I can understand that logically, but it's an emotional thing. And sometimes to do that is not always easy.
Yeah.
And my pricing from what I charged from when I started 6 years ago is at a minimum 3 times what it was. And that's to make my numbers work. Mm-hmm. That's not because I am just greedy and want to make so much money, but things are very expensive. $60,000, $80,000 cars are expensive, and to insure them is expensive, and to have qualified drivers. And you think of this and this is what makes sense. But I think a lot of people do that. And I think it comes from a genuinely good place of just not wanting to overcharge people and watching everything in your county, double and triple in price. You think, do I want to be part of the problem? And then, some people are completely priced out because of that.
Right. And I think it's important to stand for your value and to stand for your employees' value.
Yeah.
And to communicate those things when people question your pricing.
Yeah.
So I don't like it when I question pricing and people accuse me of trying to be selfish. I like it when people look me in the eye and say, I understand why you might think this is expensive compared to what you're used to. And I want to pay my employees a living wage.
Yeah. And this is like a terrible way to learn this in hindsight, because when I was more of a solopreneur, it was easy for me not to charge that much.
Hmm.
But then when I need to pay employees and I'm paying salaries, I'm not going to, make them suffer, and I want to pay them well. I want to be a company that they want to work for.
Right.
That has to be reflected in the billing, and the same thing should be hopefully reflected in their performance. There's all kinds of arguments there too, but yeah, when you have a bigger team counting on you and depending on you, like that's when your numbers need to make sense even beyond yourself so people can afford to live here.
And I've lived in a lot of resort communities, and I think people are used to the locals discount concept, which I haven't seen used as much here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to see more entrepreneurs take advantage of that, because even when someone from out of town says, why don't I get that price? You can come back and say, because we have a major issue here, and it's an opportunity for education. Bozeman is the most expensive place in the country right now as compared to the median income and the median house price. And, I moved here from Boulder, Colorado. The home that I owned in Boulder, Colorado, if I were to go back and buy that, I would spend twice as much as the home that I own here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people coming from out of state realize some of the challenges that we have here. They look at comparatively cheaper prices for things and don't understand that the people who are trying to live here have not seen the income that they've seen in other places.
Yeah, it was such a strange thing I noticed in the economy when I came here in 2019 is a lot of my friends, they live here, but they don't necessarily work here. They might work remotely or whatever. And it is such an interesting economy. I don't even know if interesting is a good word because it's troublesome that there's not an economy here necessarily that supports what it costs to live here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what that looks like in 10 years or, because I don't know. Obviously been going on for a while, but I think it's going on even more and more as things get more expensive here.
Yeah. Well, I want to work with the people who want to move to our state rather than against,
Yeah.
because I don't think we're going to be able to stop it. Going back to my example, if you're living in Boulder, Colorado, or in San Francisco, and you can work remotely, and you look at a place like Bozeman that has a lot of the amenities that people are looking for, and it's half the price, it's a no-brainer. They're going to move here.
Yeah.
So let's figure out how to leverage those people, invite them to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem, and charge them a little bit more so we can subsidize everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could see that, like the logic in the local discount and that kind of stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
And remind me, you were at Montana Festival or no?
I was.
Yeah, that is what I do love about Montana Festival is that they are generally talking solutions.
Right.
And that's not as common.
Right.
And I'm just sort of intrigued and wonder what is the long-term solution to that such an expensive city with not necessarily a local economy to support it. And how does that play out in the next decade?
Yeah. Well, you're a part of the solution. You're working to build a business here. You're paying employees. You're adding value by connecting business people to an audience. I would say just keep doing what you're doing and thinking. The other thing, you kind of touched on this, but I find that a lot of the entrepreneurs that I meet in Montana need a little encouragement to just think bigger, because they have a talent level, from my experience, that rivals people all around the country. But because they haven't been exposed to things like billion-dollar companies like in other communities, I don't think that they can grasp that they could actually get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that I can speak to that myself. When you are exposed to or find yourself in those environments, it awakens the conception of that potential in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not, and I'll speak to when I was farming, that was kind of what I was exposed to, and that was what I assumed the potential was. And it was a little bit of like push and pull of exposing myself to the right places and things and finding that. But I think you're very accurate in what you're saying, that you will kind of just put that self-imposed ceiling on ourselves.
Hmm.
And when you're not, yeah, in a massive city like New York or Los Angeles or name any other big city, you don't think that, you kind of think this might be it.
And I also appreciate that you're going to raise children. And for people who aren't going to raise children, I really encourage people to coach and to mentor, because that's how we solve the problems in our state, is getting kids to think bigger. I want to give a shout out to my ex-husband because he's one of the best Montana success stories that I know about. His name's Kraus. So he grew up with a single mom, struggled to make ends meet. He was really good in sports, which is the only reason he was able to go to college. And he started working for technology companies. He worked for two technology companies that had very large exits. And I think he was able to go from being somebody who struggled to make ends meet to somebody who worked for a company that sold for over $800 million because he exposed himself to that startup community and saw that potential. And he more or less has retired, moved back to Montana. He coaches baseball. He coaches the team that he grew up playing. And he's opening a sandwich shop called Bambino's in the old O'Toole's building in downtown Helena in the next couple of weeks, and is going to employ high school students and help mentor people who need jobs in our state. So I would like to see more people doing stuff like that. And yeah, mentoring makes a difference. Mentoring entrepreneurs, mentoring kids, all those things.
I mean, he won my heart at baseball because I grew up playing baseball and loved
Oh,
baseball.
nice.
And I did for 5 years. I did the CAP mentoring program here, and I've said that my whole life, and that's why I did it, is because I had some great mentors growing up, and I kind of say like give and give and take of exposing myself to things, but being around people that might have helped me, think a little bit more is possible. And I do think there's you can't ever measure the value of what that can do for someone.
Right.
Just for someone to see, be around someone. And I question, if I should be the person mentoring a kid. But I think that, if any of us are doing anything and can offer some sort of coaching or encouragement, that's very cool.
Yeah. Well, I would say a resounding yes from the amount of time that I've spent with you, that you should be mentoring kids. And
Thank
I'm
you.
glad that you're going to have kids. You and your fiance are both amazing. So thank you for raising our next generation.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure it'll be a whole new world of challenges.
Yeah.
When you had given your intro a little bit of three different things, it sounded like, I mean, I've got an idea of what the way you want to go, but does it sound like you're in a little bit of a liminal space too about what you're actually doing next in your life?
Yeah. So I used to be someone with a 5-year plan and feel like I was in total control of all the things that I needed to do to meet my goal. And since moving to Montana, I didn't just leave a career that had largely been my identity for a decade and get divorced and find myself in a place where I didn't know anyone. I also got really sick. I had a very large tumor that curved my spine. And as an active person who uses being outdoors for all of my, not all of my, but a lot of my social interaction and coping mechanisms, that was so hard for me. And what I learned from that process is I'm not actually in control. And sometimes when you allow yourself to slow down a little bit, really interesting opportunities come your way. So I have an idea of the direction that I want to go, and I'm totally open to the fact that somebody I might meet from this podcast, for instance, might show up on my doorstep and be an opportunity bigger than what I can envision myself.
How are you okay with being in that kind of unknowing?
Well, living in Paradise Valley, Montana helped a lot. I think when you allow yourself to really experience the power of nature, it just reminds you of how insignificant you are. And also connects you in a way that helps you think bigger.
How do you experience nature?
Mm. Uh, I like to hike. I like to run. I love to ski. And I lived on a windy dirt road in Paradise Valley. And I would say the way that I've felt more connected to nature more so than any other part of my life was just simply walking down that windy dirt road and seeing the expansive view of Paradise Valley. What I love about Paradise Valley is the elevation differential. So you have got the flat valley and then the mountains just jut up immediately. And that is humbling and inspiring at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's been a weird experience that I've been understanding, as I get older is there's actually a lot less control than I think I had.
Hmm.
But there's a strange sense of freedom in, trying to hold on so tightly and control everything, which is exhausting.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's weird to think that like, I think the younger me would think the older I get, the wiser I'll get and I'll have everything controlled. And the more I realized is, wow, there's so many things that are so out of control. So, I don't, how do you sort of find a direction and go forward and be open to that at the same time?
Right. Uh, One of our most recent podcast episodes is about trusting yourself. And I have been doing this experiment to see if I allow myself to just trust that I'll know what to do when the moment comes, that I'll know what to do. That seems to be working in my favor. And I could not have done that at 25. People are afraid of aging, but so far it's working in my favor. I think when you've worked for 25 years and can trust that the time that you've put into that will just start to yield benefits. I spend a lot of time feeling anxious about which decisions I should make and what's going to happen when I arrive at that rubber meets the road moment. And when I allow myself to trust that I'll know and that I've already done the work, it seems to be working out just fine.
Yeah, you reminded me of it's a country song. It's an Alan Jackson song, and I sent it to a friend and a mentor, and he's over twice my age. And the line in it, the song is "The Older I Get," and the line says, "If I found the fountain of youth, I wouldn't drink a drop, and that's the truth."
Mm,
And I think this is what he's alluding to.
mm,
And it's a great song. It's very poetic, but it says, "Funny how it seems I'm getting to my best years yet."
mm.
And I understand that. I could, it'd be really fun to be 20 again. And, I still play sports and I'm pretty athletic, and it would be even more fun with my current experience and, a 20-year-old's body. But if you could only have one without the other, I'll take where I'm at now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Last week I figured out it was my 90th triathlon. I did my first triathlon when I was 15 and got pretty into it in my 20s. So there was a time where I was doing 15 to 20 a year. And I couldn't do a triathlon for 5 years because I had that tumor that curved my spine, and finally got back into it on my 45th birthday about 10 days ago. And I had my
Happy
best
belated birthday.
Thank you. I had my best triathlon ever at 45. And I think it's because it does take a while to just figure out how to live in your body. And just like business and everything else, technique and preparation and experimentation and educating yourself on what to eat and how to perform and all those things matters.
Yeah. I mean, I can even speak to that now in my mid 30s. I enjoy playing baseball the most now that I did my whole life, because how I understand myself and my body, and
Mm-hmm.
I've taken so much of the pressure off myself because and there's part of it is I'm not trying to play professionally. So I just genuinely enjoy it.
Yeah.
And there's still a good amount of pressure, and that's why I still play hardball, and I love that, but there's a freedom in when you get to that spot where you're not just trying to micromanage everything.
Right.
and work against yourself half the time, it seems like.
Right.
Tell me a little bit more about this podcast. What are
Sure.
what kind of people are you talking to, and what is that taught you about
Yeah.
yourself?
So I just have honest conversations, just give you a feel for some of the topics. Our most recent episode is an episode with a longtime friend, mentor, and one of my investors who was battling cancer the same time that I was having my health problems. And we talked about how cancer changed our life for the better and for the worse. My executive assistant, she made the very generous jump to donate a kidney. And we talked about the ins and outs of what that is like. Um, I've had several episodes about dating and the adventures of that, and some honest conversations about what goes well and not so well in that. And always just looking for thoughtful people who want to have conversations in which they're not afraid to ask the hard questions rather than settle for a comfortable non-answer.
Yeah. Maybe you asked me this when we met. Is there anything overarching that you see in the different people you talk to, or just is there anything that sticks out at you as far as the type of people you interview? I mean, are you always interviewing somebody else?
For the most part,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's more of a conversation than an
Uh-huh.
interview.
And I'll say to that too, because if it's ever called an interview, I'm like, well, I never have thought about it as an interview.
Mm,
Because I guess in my mind, an interview seems very formatted,
right.
and this is very open ended.
Yeah. Well, I actually have a short attention span and I have a hard time paying attention to podcasts unless they're conversational. So I try to bring that to my podcast, and I'm glad that you bring that to this as well. I would say that the common thread is just people who keep my attention.
Mm-hmm.
If people keep my attention in everyday conversations, I love to bring them on the podcast.
Yeah. Do you see anything in these guests? Like, is there a common thread as to anything they're like? Look, why do you think they choose to be guests on your podcast? Do you usually invite them? Is there a lot of people that say no? Do you see anything there?
I think I've only had one person say no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go out on a limb and just say, I think it might be me. Everybody who I invite has had the experience of having a conversation with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so they see what I'm good at, which is asking questions that other people don't ask and seeing patterns that other people don't see. And so I think they get excited about the opportunity to record something like that.
Yeah. You don't have to answer this question, but like, was there any terrible experiences you had, or like?
Um, you know, we've been able to cut out some of the stuff. I wouldn't say there was any terrible experience, but sometimes people get too detailed and too into the weeds.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes also people can, there's a woman named Bex Frucht who's a local celebrity. Do you know who she is? She runs a show called TMI, Too Much Information, that's
Okay.
at Last Best Comedy and other locations in Livingston and in Bozeman. And she's just sort of this larger than life, extremely honest celebrity personality. And she turned me on to this idea of trauma dumping, which is people want to tell their story about the things that they've experienced. And sometimes they unload their trauma in a way that makes people shut down because it's just too much to process. And so I've had a little bit of that I've had to just cut out.
Yeah. And I've been there too. Like, I can relate to that because as somebody, as a man who will have very open, honest, transparent conversations, there's a line that I generally won't cross. Sometimes if the context is appropriate in the situation, and it may or may not be on a podcast, but there's a line, and I've been on the other side of that when it's just like, it's a little too much in the, in a respectful way, but it can be a lot. And like, sometimes I will, to give context or to have some mutual rapport, we'll share some stuff, but there's always I would say I'm more reluctant to just like, here's everything that's gone on in my life. It's a give and take, but I know what you're saying, and I've done that. I'm not too like crazy, but there's definitely stuff I've edited out, and there's definitely like full transparency. Quite a few podcasts I haven't even released. So, um, and I never like, I just don't announce those as far as I'm concerned. They never happen, but there's like plenty of good reasons to not do
Yeah.
that. So
So how do you handle that when you invite a guest, they make the time to do the podcast, and then you don't want to release it?
it's awkward. It sucks.
I bet. Yeah.
But in the spirit of, you know, putting out things I believe in and being honest, like that is the choice I make rather than let me just like put stuff out that I don't like, that I don't think is valuable and or I don't believe in. And I don't think will do, much positivity for that person or anyone else.
Right. And sometimes, as we talked a little bit about before, you learn more from your failures than your successes.
Yeah.
I remember when I was raising money for our venture capital fund, I had this opportunity to invest. I had this opportunity to pitch in front of 400 investors. And it was to this group that one of my mentors, who I really thought highly of, invited me to present in front of. And I felt like he really went out on a limb to invite me to do it. And I worked so hard on this presentation. I thought it was so good. And I got up there and did the presentation, and I could tell that it just fell flat. And he pulled me aside afterward and said, "Hey, I know what you're capable of. And the person up there was not you. And I'm not going to share this presentation with anybody because you can do better." And he gave me some concrete feedback, and he was right. And I often think about what would have happened if he would have been like most people, which is, let me present. Because it's awkward, he just wouldn't have said anything about it. The presentation had already been done. And then he just never would have invited me back. And I'm so grateful that he told me that I could be better.
Yeah. And if you think about it, and I'm saying this as someone who, has to deliver this bad news or say, I'm not going to produce this episode, but yeah, that'd be great if someone could have your perspective. Say, hey, thanks for risking your reputation to tell me something that might help me improve.
Yeah.
Because I am the one risking looking like an asshole.
Right.
Because somebody spent their time to come here. I invited them or they were referred by somebody that I know. And, I could like say, like, look, I think like this will benefit you long term. Like I would understand if somebody wanted to tell me where to go and how to get there when I say that.
Yeah.
But that's a very cool perspective.
Well, I mean, that's an important thing that I learned about being a venture capitalist. So one of the hardest things about being a venture capitalist is you look at 1,000 opportunities to invest in one. And these are 1,000 people who have, in some cases, invested their children's college funds, have quit their jobs, have poured their blood, sweat, and tears into their dream. And you have to tell them, I don't believe in you. And we tried to be as straightforward as possible in that and say, these are the things that we're excited about. These are the reasons why we're saying no. And these are a couple things that might help you if you want to keep doing this in the future. And sometimes people would be very angry about that. And sometimes those same people would come back 5, 6, 10 years later and say, thank you for saying that.
Yeah. I mean, that's cool because to have that perspective long term.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, and like, it still happens. And it's a fine line. And this is just a continual learning experience. But there's episodes, plenty that I've published that I wish I'd kind of pushed back with people sometimes, with things they're doing with their business or their beliefs. And that's been a huge evolution for me is, you can agree with people and be polite. And sometimes it's just to challenge ideas. When I've done that, I've appreciated the episode so much more than when I've just kind of left it. And, but it's, I've technically done over 200 episodes and I'm still learning and trying to figure out, when do I push back? Like it's, we don't have to agree, but I appreciate the honesty in it.
Yeah, and we're just starting a friendship, so we don't know each other that well.
Yeah.
But I will say feedback is my love language,
Mm-hmm.
to receive and to give. And so I will never be offended if you
Mm-hmm.
have feedback for me. I will actually feel like that's a sign of respect and
Yeah.
care for me.
Yeah, no, I haven't had any that I'm thinking of in this episode, but I'm like, it's something I'm thinking about more. And my mindset is, I guess, as a business owner or an entrepreneur, is like, well, going forward, I can use this to keep improving.
Yeah,
And I'm not going to cry about it too much. It is what it is.
right.
It's out there in the world now
Yeah.
for the end of time.
Well, if any of your listeners have some feedback for me, I welcome that.
Yeah, or me.
Great.
Yeah, bring it on.
Great.
What else should anyone know about you or
Hmm.
this dating thing that's going on? Or just
Yeah. I think I'm gonna just go out on a limb and give my email address, which I
Mhm.
may regret. So my VC firm was Merge Lane, like you're merging a lane on the highway, and my email address is elizabeth@mergelane.com. And I would like to connect to anybody who's looking for romantic connections and would like a best friend to pitch them. I would like to connect to people who are doing extraordinary things in our state and would benefit from some mentorship and some connections and potentially some capital investment to make them even more extraordinary. And I just want to point people to imperfectlyhonest.com for blog posts and podcasts. And if you would like to come on the podcast and have an honest conversation, I'd love to talk to those people as well.
Cool. And I'll put your email in the podcast description too.
Thanks. And for the Wingman Pitch event that's going to happen in September, we're still working on a date, but if you guys haven't gone to Less Best Comedy in Bozeman, it's definitely worth a visit. And if you pay attention to their calendar, they'll keep you in the loop.
Okay. And if you do get dates on any of this, I can update descriptions and put it in.
Great.
Cool. Anything else anyone should know about you?
I'd like to be a part of the solution rather than the problem in Montana. I recognize that I profited in large part from a lot of the problems that Montana is now experiencing that Colorado experienced a couple decades ago. And I profited from that growth and moved here and purchased a home that most people who live here cannot afford. And I get that I'm part of the problem and I'd like to be part of the solution.
Well, I mean, amen to that, that you want to, that you are thinking solution oriented in what can we do to improve things going forward.
Thanks.
Yeah. I mean, and that was essentially what I just said. There's no sense in, crying about it.
Yeah.
But we can definitely learn from it and improve going forward.
Yeah. And Tim, you're doing some really cool stuff. So what do you want people to know about? What action do you want people to take?
I mean, I think to what you just said, if you've got solutions, if you want to, reach out to myself or you, because I know a lot of people by nature of this podcast and being a business owner, if you have ideas for solutions and you want to get your hands dirty and be part of it or talk about it and spread the word about it, then let's do it.
Yeah. And to our point about the importance of businesses growing to support the economic growth of our state, what's your elevator pitch on your business and how do people learn more about that?
Oh, the business? They know how. If they're listening to this, they know how to.
I don't know. They might listen just because I send it to them and then they won't know you.
It's mountain-mule.com. Everything's there. What we do, who we are, all our podcast blogs, all our podcasts, and my email's on there. So you can find me.
Great.
Our phone number's on there.
And so what might people be looking for from your business that would want to use your business?
I mean, anyone that wants safe, reliable drivers to get anywhere in the state.
Safe, reliable drivers. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Uber is not as predictable in the state of Montana.
Yeah. Anyone who wants to make their flights on time, anyone who doesn't want to have to worry about driving because they want to take in this beautiful landscape.
Yep.
So any of that. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. This was fun and excited to continue our friendship.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for listening, folks. You can find the full blog post for every episode along with key takeaways and links at mountain-mule.com. If you haven't yet, consider following the show. That one small action helps these Montana businesses get seen, grow, and thrive, and it helps this podcast keep going too. If you know a business that would be a good fit for the show, we'd love to hear from you. Just reach out through the website or social. Thank you for supporting these Montana businesses. See you on the next show.